Welcome to your deep dive. Today we're diving into Dr. Jordan Peterson and this really interesting conversation he had on the Diary of a CEO YouTube channel. We're going to be talking about his thoughts on handling tough stuff, truly listening in relationships, and even building a life that you find really meaningful.
I'm always struck by how Peterson connects those everyday things, like seriously, cleaning your room, to these deeper psychological ideas. It's like he's saying, hey, your messy desk, it might actually be saying something about, your inner world.
Okay, see, now you've got me. So how does he make that connection between
Well,
a messy room and, I don't know, conquering your demons?
well, he's all about starting small, but he says you have to find the smallest possible first step. Something so tiny it would be almost laughable not to do it. That's how you break down those really overwhelming challenges.
So instead of I'm going to climb Mount Everest, it's I'm going to put on my hiking boots.
Exactly. And he tells this great story about a client who was really struggling. The guy couldn't even vacuum his room. So Peterson's like, just do 1 square foot. That's it. And celebrating those tiny victories, it builds momentum.
That snowball effect, right?
Yes,
Starting small, but gaining traction.
totally. And it actually ties into this thing called exposure therapy. He talks about this a lot. He uses the example of helping people who are terrified of elevators. Right? You're not going to throw them into a crowded elevator on day one.
Oh, God, no.
Right. So he's much more strategic. Maybe they start by just looking at pictures of elevators, then gradually they move closer, step by step, until they can actually stand inside one. The key is constantly assessing their comfort level.
So it's about building trust, not just in the process, but in yourself, proving to yourself that you can handle it. I love that.
And you know that same principle. It pops up again when he talks about relationships. He's a huge advocate for active listening, especially for men. He even tells this funny story about this colleague who's really unhappy at work.
Oh, I want to hear this. What happened with the colleague?
So instead of jumping in with solutions, which I think a lot of us do, he just kept asking questions, really listening for almost 30 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. And by the end, his colleague realized that her initial reasons for being unhappy, they were kind of surface level. It was like peeling back an onion.
Oh, I totally get that. You think it's about one thing, but then when you really dig deep.
Exactly. And that's Peterson's point. He believes that when we truly listen, without interrupting or judging, it lets those deeper emotions and motivations come out.
Okay, I have a confession. I am so bad at interrupting. What would Peterson say to people like me?
He'd say it's about resisting that urge to fix things. Instead, be present. Create this calm, receptive energy that lets the other person really feel heard.
It's funny, sometimes the most helpful thing you can do is just listen and validate what someone's going through, even if you don't have a solution.
100%. And Peterson says this is especially important for men to understand. He says men are often wired for problem solving, focused on the what.
Right.
While women, they often need to understand the why behind a problem.
I can definitely see that. It's like we speak different languages sometimes when it comes to emotions.
Totally. And he calls this difference in how we approach problems threat detection.
Hmm.
Women, he argues, are often wired to be more sensitive to potential threats, both physical and emotional,
Okay.
which can lead them to, spiral into worst-case scenario.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Right. So instead of a guy being like, it's not a big deal, he should be saying, okay, help me understand why you're feeling this way.
Yeah, validate.
Exactly. It's not about dismissing those feelings, but acknowledging their validity. Even if you don't fully understand, it's about creating that safe space for honest communication.
Which, let's be real, is way easier said than done, especially in the middle of an argument, right? So how do you actually put this into practice? Does Peterson have any, go-to phrases?
He does. He suggests asking this deceptively simple question. If I could give you what you wanted, what would it be?
Wow. See, that's good. That's so direct, but in a way that, actually gets to the heart of it.
Exactly. It shifts the focus away from blame and towards, working together. It's like, okay, how do we solve this together?
Instead of, whose fault is this? And you did this. I like that. That makes it feel less like a battle and more like you're on the same team.
Exactly. And that's crucial, not just in romantic relationships, by the way, but in all areas of life, even work.
Oh, interesting. How so? How does that play out at work?
Well, Peterson's a big believer that if you're approaching your boss, come with a solution, not just a problem.
Oh, I like that.
Right? It shows initiative.
It's like that saying, don't bring me problems, bring me solutions.
Exactly. And Peterson would say that taking that kind of proactive approach can be huge for your career.
Yeah. It makes you realize how often we get stuck in that complaining mode instead of actually trying to fix things.
It's a subtle shift, but it's huge. And you know what? This is actually a great transition to another one of Peterson's big ideas. He calls them holes in the bedroom floor.
Holes in the bedroom floor. Okay, now I'm a little scared.
I promise it makes sense. This is actually a really powerful metaphor he uses to talk about childhood trauma and how those experiences we haven't dealt with can really affect us, especially in our relationships.
Oh, wow. Okay, so holes in the bedroom floor represent.
Think of it this way. Those holes, they're like the unresolved stuff from our past.
Yeah.
The things we keep tripping over, even if we don't realize it.
Okay, now I get it. That's such a visual, right? You can practically feel yourself tripping.
Exactly. And as Peterson points out, those unresolved issues can pop up in so many ways, especially in how we handle conflict.
Can you give me an example?
Sure. Let's say someone was bullied as a kid, right? Fast forward to being an adult, they might misinterpret their partner's actions. They might see their partner as being a bully, even when that's not what's happening at all. It's like those past wounds. They color how we see the world.
That's such a good point, because it's not even conscious, right?
Exactly. It's all happening under the surface. And this is where understanding the root of our reactions becomes so important.
Because it's about realizing that sometimes a reaction that seems irrational might actually be coming from a place of hurt.
Exactly. So how do we heal those old wounds? How do we fix the holes?
Yeah, how do we do that? What does Peterson suggest?
He says it starts with actually revisiting those painful memories. Not to dwell on them, but to understand how they made us who we are.
Okay.
He wants us to imagine different paths we could have taken, not to wallow in regret, but to gain perspective.
Oh, I see what you're saying. It's like rewriting the narrative, right?
Exactly. It's about self-reflection and forgiveness, both of ourselves and maybe those who hurt us.
I like that. It's about recognizing that sometimes holding on to resentment just keeps us stuck.
100%. And this process of letting go is so important, not just for us, but for our relationships too. And that actually leads us to Peterson's ideas about identity.
Okay, identity. That's a big one. And I know Peterson has some, shall we say, strong opinions on this topic.
He does. Peterson, he's pretty critical of how people define themselves these days, just based on things like race or sexuality. He thinks it leads to this really, limited view of life, and who wants that?
It's like he's saying, don't be a label. There's so much more to you than that.
Exactly. He actually calls it a subsidiary identity, meaning that's just one piece of who you are. He wants us to find meaning in, taking responsibility, building real relationships, contributing to something bigger than ourselves.
So it's less about fitting to a box and more about, what do you bring to the table? What's your unique thing?
Yeah.
I like that.
Right. And he connects this to, the decline of religion and the whole, do whatever feels good thing that's so big now, especially for younger people. He actually thinks it's making people unhappy because they don't have anything bigger than themselves to believe in.
Like they're unmoored, adrift.
Yeah, exactly. So how do we even find that deeper meaning? It's not like Peterson's giving us step-by-step instructions, right?
Yeah, he's not big on those easy answers, is he?
Nope. He's more about embracing the struggle, taking ownership of our choices, and honestly just trying to be better than we were yesterday. Not for anyone else, but for ourselves.
There's that self-responsibility again. It keeps coming up.
It's a big one for him. And he's not afraid to say, life's going to throw some punches.
Yeah.
He's big on the whole idea that we're going to suffer, make mistakes, have to pick ourselves up. It's about building that resilience.
He's not selling sunshine and rainbows, that's for sure. But, there's something refreshing about that. It's not some magic formula. It's like, show up, do the work, right?
Exactly. And I think that's why he's so popular, especially with younger people. The world feels kind of crazy right now.
Yeah.
And he's offering them a way to deal with that. But it's not easy.
Definitely not. It's about facing some hard truths, isn't it?
100%. Speaking of hard truths, that reminds me of another thing Peterson talks about that's so important. Truth-telling. Actually being honest, even when it's difficult. He sees it as the foundation of good relationships.
It's so easy to fall into that trap of little white lies to keep the peace. But I get what you're saying. Is he saying those little lies actually do more damage?
Exactly. He uses this example, right, of a husband who's always complimenting his wife's clothes, even when he doesn't like them.
Oh, ouch.
Seems harmless, right?
Yeah.
But then she can never really trust his opinion.
Right. Because he's not being authentic.
Exactly. It creates these little cracks in the relationship. And Peterson, he'd much rather see couples have those tough conversations.
Yeah.
Even if it leads to an argument.
So, better to clear the air, rip off the Band-Aid.
Yes. It's about building real intimacy. And that requires, like, being vulnerable, being your true self. It's funny, he actually compares relationships to running a business.
Wait, what? How does that work?
He says couples should actually have, like, a standing meeting for at least 90 minutes every week just to talk about the hard stuff. Money, family, those little resentments we all have.
Oh, wow. So you're actually scheduling time to, like, check in with each other. I kind of love that.
Right. Because then you're not letting those small issues turn into huge blowouts.
Totally. It makes it more like a partnership, less like you're on opposing sides.
Exactly. And this goes back to personal responsibility.
Yeah.
Owning our part in things.
It's like we can't control other people, but we can control how we show up.
100%. And Peterson would say, we have way more power than we think to create the lives we want, but it has to start internally.
I love that. And it makes me think about this phrase he uses, embrace the unbearable excitement of a life well lived.
Now, there's a phrase, right? It's kind of perfect, though, isn't it? Life is going to be messy. It's going to be hard. But there's also so much beauty in that.
Yeah, it's like he's saying, lean into it. Don't shy away from the hard stuff. That's where the good stuff is, too.
Exactly. And what's so great is you can tell he lives by that. He talks about, like, the joy he gets from connecting with people, from learning new things, from doing work that matters to him. It's contagious.
It totally is. He's like living proof that you don't need to have it all figured out to live a good life.
Exactly. It's the journey, not the destination.
It's true. And, when he talks about his life, it's clear he's really living it. He's not just talking the talk, he's walking the walk.
Yeah, it's like the journey itself is the reward, right? Those detours, the unexpected stuff, that's where the growth happens.
Totally. And it's like he's saying it's okay to not have all the answers. Like, who needs a 5-year plan when you can just kind of, see where life takes you?
Right. Sometimes the best stuff happens when you least expect it.
100%. It's like, why are we so afraid of the unknown? It could be amazing. Peterson's all about embracing that. Like, hey, you're a work in progress. Enjoy it.
It's true. And there's something so freeing about that. We're always growing, always changing. That's not a bad thing.
Exactly. What if instead of dreading those bumps in the road, we saw them as like opportunities?
Right. Embrace the imperfections.
Yeah.
Peterson talks about living intentionally with a purpose.
Yeah.
And yeah, we can't control everything that happens to us, but we control how we react.
It's like that saying, you can't always choose the music, but you can choose how you dance.
Exactly. And Peterson would say, you got to dance with your whole heart, with courage, with compassion, believing in yourself.
I love that. This has been such a great deep dive. We covered so much, from those little everyday things to these big questions about life.
He makes you think, doesn't he?
He really does, and I appreciate that he's not afraid to get real. Life's not always easy, but we've got this.
We do. And he reminds us that our choices, they matter. Not just for us, but for everyone around us.
It's like a call to action, Show up, be present, make a difference.
And when things get tough, face them head on.
Love it. So as we wrap things up here, I have one last thought for everyone listening. What's one thing you can do today, right now, that aligns with your values?
What choice can you make that moves you closer to the life you want to live?
Keep those questions in mind, keep exploring, and we'll see you on the next deep dive.